There we go.
Hello,
Yes, hello.
Dr. Datta, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, albeit virtually.
Our pleasure. So Dr. Datta, just so you know, I have, I'm at work right now in my office, and I have my IT staff,
Okay.
four other gentlemen with me. So
All right, fair.
I've bragged you up quite a bit.
I was just saying, Russ, that much of this is new to me. And it's wonderful that you have IT staff that will probably understand some of these acronyms that I've seen in the presentation.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully they do more than I do.
Okay, here we go. Oh, is that Ben? I think he's still getting sound. Lauren, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. We're doing that sound check.
Perfect.
Alicia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Perfect.
hear you.
Perfect. We're going to wait another minute or two and then get ourselves going. Is that good with you, Dr. Datta?
Yes, sounds fantastic. Actually.
Good.
Us and Zoom. Mike's still on. Oh, is it? Yeah.
All right. Dr. Datta, are you ready to start us out after I give you a brief intro?
Sure.
I'm Lori Walker, and I'm director of the Executive MBA program here at Kent State. And I am so glad to do virtually or hear from you virtually. And this is a very timely subject because with the added dependence we have now on virtual meetings, cybersecurity is critical. And as we look at how we're dealing with that, we're fortunate in the Executive MBA program to have Dr. Datta, who not only has a host of talents in terms of IT and teaches and has studied in his PhD program decision-making models, but has really applied this in very many ways all over the world. And you probably saw a lot of his research in the invite, and that speaks for itself. But I really wanted to add in that in addition to cybersecurity, he has done projects with the Executive MBA program that have helped governments, particularly in Italy, as they are trying to transform digitally and look at the entire problem beyond just the framework of the technology. So with that said, Dr. Datta, I'm ready to get us started.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Thank you everybody for taking the time to attend. It's both interesting and informative, but mainly it's very, very pertinent. So the topic of today's presentation is called V-Access or Vigilant Access, 7 Rules for Cybersecurity During a Crisis. And we'll use the COVID-19 case to sort of illustrate what we are talking about. I do have a few requests though. If you could kindly mute your phones or your machine once you have a question, and then unmute them, because or else it carries a bit of interference, and enough it sometimes creates a bit of a cacophony. And then sort of quarter of the way through, we'll have a couple of small polls, and I'd love to know and pick your brains on what you think about certain things. And the third thing is that, again, if you have any questions in between, turn it on the chat box and send us a note. We'll try and respond to them. And even after this goes, whether you're in the EMBA program or planning on joining it or being an absolutely illustrious alumni, let us know, and I'm always keen on finding a way to solve things. So we'll get on with it. Thank you again very much, and let's begin. So COVID-19 has become the digital transformation linchpin. It is the fulcrum that has started digital transformation, but we also realize that, you know, virus typically follows global trade, right? The countries that have been affected by the virus have also been the countries that have been big participants in global trade. But it's affected every single country in the world. And 2 facts have emerged. The first thing you realize is every one of our companies, right, every organization, companies need to reduce uncertainty. So companies don't want this whole idea of, will we have customers? When will we have customers? Can employees come and work? How do we make sure that they're maintaining productivity and keeping up with all the things that need to be kept up with? So they're pushing employees and consumers to the cloud faster than we can say, beam me up, Scotty, right? So this is truly a time when companies are saying, we need to digitally transform ourselves so that we can always be there regardless of whether we can physically come or not. The second thing is that you trying to reduce uncertainty also means you want to increase business continuity. So adopting and pivoting with a whatever works and anything goes attitude. Think of just about every company. They're using Teams, they're using Skype, they're using SharePoint, they're using Google Meet, among a series of a plethora of other technologies. But this idea of reducing uncertainty and increasing continuity, all we are saying is it has created a quick and dirty digital transformation that has been forced upon us. So we didn't always opt for it to be this messy, but it has happened, and this is the brave new world that we are navigating right now. So in a Fortune article, it's interesting, it said more than 73% CEOs mentioned that COVID-19 was the digital transformation linchpin. This is what even companies who are thinking, well, we might go digital in a matter of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We've been forced to go digital because, frankly speaking, the economy depends on it. However, there is a dark side. With digital transformation come digital threats. Sudden digital transformation invites digital threats. So anytime, just in life, when we move through something, we navigate through something in a very messy manner, just piecing things together just to make things work, there are likely to be failures. In this case, the failure comes as a cybersecurity threat. So the need to innovate and pivot during the pandemic has companies crumbling. To that, add a large dash of fear and uncertainty. We are fearful, which means we're spending more time online. We have high uncertainty, which means anybody who's throwing any technology at us we're immediately saying, sure, if that works, if we can get something running, let's go for it. Perfect example is what we're using right now. You remember when Zoom started, every single company started going for Zoom. The adoption went up 400 times in a matter of weeks. And then suddenly came the Zoom bombs, only to realize that, wait, the process by which people were signing into Zoom suddenly left these URLs, these invitation hyperlinks open. With open hyperlinks, you could now suddenly join up any particular, whether it's an organizational or a personal group meeting, and suddenly push content that nobody would have expected and stay anonymous in the process. So this need for flexibility, remote work, and especially something dangerous called BYOD, which is bring your own device, and IoTs, which stand for Internet of Things. Those would be things such as your smartphones and your smart devices and your Nest and your voice augmented reality things such as Google Home and Amazon Alexa. More things you add, it creates a technology Wild West. With so many things in there, even though you are now remotely working for the company content is now going through your home network. And your home network has devices that are not really being controlled, not being patched, not being secured, which means it becomes an absolute playground for any miscreant to try and see if they can tweak certain sets to gain access to the weakest link, which is our individual human behavior. And the second thing is that there's an accelerating digital transformation has ushered a new round of cyber criminals that are now creating cartels. I don't know if you heard, but yesterday, the Dutch and the Belgian police hit dark web chat setup called EncroChat, which is basically stands for encrypted chat, which was simply put being the mafia in the virtual world, where you could pay for tortures, pay for trafficking, all through the dark web, and which has suddenly become even more popular subtly. So it's an open season for new technologies, too many services and technologies adding too much complexity. So more things you add into the mix, it creates complexity, because managing so many things at any given point of time becomes a huge problem. Complexity creates confusion and invites cyber threats. Each technology has its risks that opens doors for criminals. Think of it much like a fort that has so many doors that you really don't know if you might have the best fort altogether, but if one of the doors have been left open, that crisis creates the perfect opportunity for cyber criminals to leverage. So simply put, more mobile devices, more cloud-based data storage and services, more digital payment systems, IoTs, bring your own devices, they're creating more attack vectors. Plus, as we even speak, and I'll give you an example in a couple of slides, constant intrusion detection. Any second that we're spending online, somebody is trying to knock on some door on our networks to see if there are any weaknesses anywhere whatsoever. So moving forward. So COVID-19 increase in cybersecurity threats. So I've been mapping this out. And if you look at the numbers, it is truly staggering. Increase in fraudulent cures, scams, and robocalls have increased by 3,000%. Remote employee phishing has increased by 667%. FBI cyber crimes reporting by 300%. Corporate networks by 71%. Ransomware 148%. And financial cyber attacks by 238%. every single attack vector has one thing and one thing in mind, which is, can we gain access to information that we can use for now or for later? Because do realize this, and I try to realize this every day myself, that today data has become the most valuable commodity in the market. Anybody that can access data about companies, about R&D, about COVID-19 research is the one that's selling that data at a very, very high premium. And suddenly this has become a lucrative venture that's no longer just some kid tinkering in a war game situation, but basically state-sponsored activities whose main job is find as much as you can because that gives us leverage. So if you look at these, so what this is a real-time map of attacks going on in the world. And the lines you see all around the globe are lines where attacks are coming in from. And I'll show you a video in a matter of seconds. So you've got all these things such as on-access scans and on-demand scans. So on-demand scan is anytime you're trying to go and watch or binge a Netflix episode, you're creating an on-demand, you're opening up a pipeline, very much like opening up your water tap. Anytime you want water, it's on demand and the water tap suddenly opens it up, which means the valve to your house opens up. Anytime the valve opens up, there's some miscreant who's thinking, all I want to know is when that valve opens up so that I can access it and get into the plumbing network of the house, very much like getting into your own internal home network. Similarly, you have all these web access viruses and malware and intrusion detection systems, but let's watch a quick video, and after that we'll take a quick poll. So this is how the attacks look like. So you see all these countries from China to Russia. This is how things are flowing. Having mentioned that, I'm going to ask Laurie to open a poll, or I could actually. Laurie, if you would you mind, poll number 3, please.
All right.
And any questions, of course, please let me know. So yes, so the question I'm asking, and it's called I did not know that. And this is poll number 3, yeah. Can everybody access the poll?
Can everyone vote?
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Lauren. Well, so the first one says that the US is the first most cyber attack country. Can you name the top 3 in order? So who are the top 3 cyber attack countries in the world? And the next one is, what do you think are APT 28 and APT 15? And then the third question is Russian hackers, and this is true. They actually have a 3-rule code of conduct. First 2 are Russians do not hack Russians. The second one is if a Russian intelligence service asks you for help, you provide it. What's the third one? And it's interesting. So we've got 3 responses. And what's the most common form of cyber attack? So wait for another 30 seconds possibly, and then we'll close it.
Now we have a few more votes to come in. I don't think it identifies you, does it?
No, I don't think so.
So no worries. Especially for me, I don't even know what those acronyms are in question 2.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a, I shouldn't have really put that in, but just wanted to see how keen somebody might be in knowing what they are.
Absolutely.
All right, so 10 more seconds and we'll end the poll. All right, ending the poll. All right, so interestingly, for question number 1, the answer is number 4, or D, which is Russia, Germany, and China. The country that's hit the most with cyber attacks is Russia first, followed by Germany, and then followed by China. Although this keeps changing. This is just in the last 3 months, right? We're putting everything into the COVID-19 setup. APT 28 and APT 15, these are actually state-sponsored Russian and Chinese hacker groups. So it's B, which is the right one, but this just shows you that these are seriously organized and extremely well-funded groups whose whole job is bring down things as much as you can. The third one, the Russian hackers have a 3-rule code of conduct. The first 2 rules are Russians don't hack Russians, and if your Russian secret intelligence service asking for your help, you provide it. The third one is whoever the person is, thank you very much, well done, watch where you vacation. That actually is their 3rd code of conduct, because where you go, they might try and hack you there. So choose where your vacation is primary, because there's always some kind of counter-intelligence going on against members of these groups. So that's very interesting. And the 4th one you've done very well is intrusion detection is the most common type of cyber attack. So that is the most common, and intrusion detection is basically trying to hit your network to check for vulnerabilities. And if there's a vulnerability, you try and get that, right? So thank you again, and we'll use that to continue. And again, any questions, let me know. So one big thing happened just last month is this new generation of cyber threats. And I think every company and every organization ought to be fearful about it right now, which is the story of ransomware at the University of California, San Francisco Medical School. So University of California, San Francisco Medical School was doing a lot of COVID-19 research. And what happened was there was a malware that was downloaded by one or many other researchers out there who were working on things. And that malware, all it did was it encrypted all their medical research data. And they asked for $1.14 million in terms of ransomware. They actually paid. I think they asked for more. And there was even a joke where one of the ransomware miscreants said that, well, if you only want to pay us $700,000, why don't you use that to buy McDonald's for your employees? So this was hidden tier, and similarly there was another one which is called the hidden tier ransomware, which used the Italian Federation of Pharmacists. But all they do is it accesses your systems, finds important data, and basically encrypts it with a key that you need to get in order to decrypt your data, or else you have no access to the data. So this has become so dangerous that now companies are taking out cyber insurance against threats on the dark web. And the dark web is a place where all these miscreants, or many miscreants, will go and try and set up transactions that otherwise would be absolutely illegal in general society. So you're seeing phishing, Trojans and malware. And of course, we all know about phishing because we all have been, at least been attempted to be phished at one point of one time or another, which basically tries to look for very similar looking websites and emails and domain names and ask you to click on a link that might take you to a place that looks good, but is far from it. So there are these trick bots and form books, loads of business email compromises, which are the big things right now. So these form book campaigns are targeting mainly educational institutions via phishing messages with Trojan applications mainly meant for teachers, such as keep teaching, or ensure this is the latest software that we've come up with, which is free for you to use to make sure that your students are submitting things on time. On the other hand, trickbot phishing emails masquerade as official details around family medicine and other similar and timely lures. Lots of emails going on with corona subject lines like coronavirus, things such as brief notes for the shipping industry. There are a lot of Android contact. So Android systems or Android operating systems are typically a big hub for a lot of Trojans that will oftentimes use things such as contact tracing. So the idea is they work off fear. So especially in Indonesia, Iran, Russia, and so forth, they work off fear and say that, no, if your neighbor has coronavirus, and they will have you download something only to steal your data. And then sites and emails dressed to look like the CDC, the World Health Organization, Social Security Administration, and even the Small Business Administration to dupe you and fish you into opening up information and giving away very, very important information that can harm your identity. And of course, the laws bits are things such as island hopping, which is you go from one to another, to another, to another file or folder to see which one might be the best set, or within the network, watering holes where you know people typically tend to come to, like people visiting the CDC, people visiting county websites. So you try to fish county websites, make them look like a legitimate site to collect information. Shoulder sniffing, which is simply put, looking over what people are doing to figure out, and especially given the fact that nowadays there are so many Trojans that mainly will turn on your computer camera without you noticing. And all the computer camera will do is basically record every time you're signing into your bank and then send that later on back to a server where they have that information as a video. And then dumpster diving is particularly interesting now, because now that we are bringing our work home, we're also dumping a lot of our work and a lot of our papers that we might be printing into our dumpsters. And there's a new group of criminals, they've been there for a long time now, they've particularly gotten active, that are basically paying rubbish bin collectors or somebody else to basically go through dumpsters of executives and managers to find information that they can piece together to get a better idea of what information they might actually need. With that, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes of break to ask me any questions that you have before we go into, now that we know all these things are there, what do we do? So any questions, guys?
I have one to add in terms of telemedicine, which I know you've been active in working on various areas of that. is there, they actually loosened the rules. I don't know if the rules were related to HIPAA, but security rules. Has that been a target, or is that not as important as other healthcare sites, such as research or data related to a massive amount of patients?
That's actually a very, very good question. So the short answer is, because the US has been sadly lagging in terms of telemedicine related infrastructures or telemedicine related application, patient information still has to follow HIPAA protocol. So there's no way around it. But the only problem is HIPAA protocols are only implemented at the server, not at the application. So let me give you an example. So you could, suppose company XYZ is offering telemedicine, suppose Cleveland Clinic is offering telemedicine. But in order to access their telemedicine service, such as even a remote consulting, what you do is you log on at a Starbucks, which basically is an open, non-secure infrastructure, and use that non-password protected network to convey that information. There could be many sniffers in between that will steal your data. Now, of course, unless that data is reaching, or unless that application itself encrypts your data before sending it to Cleveland Clinic, it becomes a big issue. Plus, there is a second big issue, which is which companies and governments are grappling with in terms of cybersecurity and privacy, which is, should information about a person be kept locally, which means a phone, or kept on a server in the cloud? Because then the question is, who actually owns that information? But that goes into more of a legislative debate rather than a straightforward. So the answer is yes, it is still guided by HIPAA compliance, but HIPAA compliance only works at the final stage rather than at the frontiers. And this is oftentimes known as an endpoint security. Whatever the endpoint is, for example, if you're wearing an Apple Watch and you're taking notes there on a general cellular network or a non-secure network, and somebody can tap into that, then suddenly the compliance issues are much more muddled. But if it is, so that's the, at least that's an attempt to provide an answer, because it's a difficult one, but it's a very, very good question though.
Good, good, thank you.
You're welcome, Martin. Any other questions? No? So in that case, let's continue.
Feel free to type into the general chat and I'll read those anytime we come to a pause.
Sure. So I'll come to a pause and maybe, actually, Laurie, why don't you do that right now? That way, let me respond to if you have any, do you have any questions right now, Laurie?
Not right now.
All right. So to continue, so what I'm proposing is, and this is a part of a paper that's going out, and it's called a V-Access strategy, which is a vigilant access strategy. And V-Access is V-A-C-C-E-S-S. So 7 letters, one each stands in. It's basically nothing but an acronym. So 7 effective strategies to manage continuity and chaos. The first thing is create a vigilant ecosystem. Now, I must start off by saying that with every time we create a mousetrap, the mice get smart, right? That's how always been the case. So beware of links, and this is very, very basic but straight stuff, but that is a part of our ecosystem. We live in a world where identities and a company's stuff and all the data is on the network. So beware of links asking for sensitive information. Visit the originating site directly rather than clicking a hyperlink, which we know is phishing 101. Second, remove identifying information from online meeting backgrounds, such as open documents, shipping addresses, logged in sites. So there's been a lot of security audits that have been done by companies, especially companies where security is well preached and well practiced. But then the minute employees are calling in from home, or customers or vendors are calling in from a virtual location, they are putting in information in the background that could, to a certain degree, even compromise a part of their identity, if not all of their identity, such as leaving a shipping container or a shipping package from Amazon lying in the background that gives them an idea of where the person lives, what the person's name is. Third, increase your Wi-Fi and personal password security without making it too complex, right? So later on, I've got a small Dilbert cartoon, which says it better than I will, but nonetheless, the thing is balancing complexity and balancing security. And of course, increase your antivirus runs, but use antivirus software to make sure. So make your ecosystem a vigilant ecosystem. Try and stay abreast of the game. Try and stay frosty. The second one is adapt for agility and changing threats. The first one is, of course, encrypt and backup. Backup is being the single call for cybersecurity solidarity. Every single ransomware threat has happened because large companies, research institutions, organizations have forgotten to back up their documents, which means that if there is a ransomware attack, or if there is a hacking attack and somebody does get access to the information and they can encrypt it, then you basically can't run your company any longer because everything is in somebody else's hand and under somebody else's lock and key. And the other thing is encrypt, which is if you encrypt, nobody will really know what they are getting or what they're trying to steal in the first place. So encryption is primary. Second, endpoint security and device management. Asset management has always been very, very important in auditing and accounting. And it's equally important when you're running a large company or a small company. Know the devices, because these endpoint devices, endpoint means what you use at the end, right? Not things at the server, not things even at a desktop level, but oftentimes things that give you a lot of mobility. Make sure that those are secure, those are registered so that you know, have they been patched? Do they have the latest security updates? Do we know what kind of applications are running out there? Because you can have the best setup in your company, but at the end of the day, if employees are working from home and they're using their own personal devices, you need to have some level of monitoring of at least the security, not the privacy, but security. Because there's no COVID-19 cybersecurity playbook, you have to adapt. And the best adaptation is empower employees by giving them the understanding of how important data and information is today, and how the world around is truly waiting to get their hands on something that they can use unscrupulously, but empower to adapt. And again, in terms of payments, use touchless payments at locations. And this is more of an ecosystem rather than an adaptation, but we need to adapt. Every time you're trying to use a touch system, the touch system, not a COVID-19 issue, not a virus issue, but a different type of virus, because a lot of people are creating false scanners into locations where you need to put in your card information. So try touchless payments. Going forward, so we've got V and A. Then the next one is communicate across various groups, divisions, and subsidiaries to create an SOP. SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. Make sure that everybody follows the same workflow. Not different workflows, not different people, different employees doing different things based on what they want. And perfect example is, think of the very fact that, you know, sometimes I'm using Zoom, sometimes I'm using Google Meet, sometimes I'm using Microsoft Teams. We're sharing documents across multiple different locations, the same document. So what is going on with that document, which basically contains data? We sometimes don't know. So use SSOs if you can, and SSOs basically stand for single sign-ons. So single sign-ons are very important so that you sign in once and you secure that very well. And after that, you can access everything. Whether you want to do it via institution or reputed companies, I would say don't build it. The very famous COVID phrase, which is the common objectives for IT phrase, is adopt, don't invent, especially during times of crisis. And don't believe in small companies that are coming out of the woodwork saying that, oh, we've come up with a better way of doing things. Right now, use reputed companies such as Google and Facebook to use single sign-ons. Don't create lot of separate, what do you call it, registrations on different sites so that you can manage it very well. And use MFA, which stands for multi-factor authentication. If somebody else is signing on, you should be able to get an immediate ping on your phone saying, hey, somebody else signed on, or something via your email that somebody else signed on from a device in this place with your credentials. Second, educate and communicate cybersecurity to family, employees, vendors, and customers. Because, you know, and all the threats, and tell them about all the threats as they emerge. Because if they don't know, you know, the people closest to you might actually inadvertently give away much more information. So communicate not only across the institution, but also make sure that employees and vendors, when they're working remotely, they communicate the same news across their family members. Then coordinate for consistency. So coordinate across various groups, divisions, and subsidiaries to create an SOP, as we talked about it. Have a consistent choice of few technologies from reputed vendors that have strong security pedigree. The best analogy I can give you would be, you wouldn't want to walk down an unknown alley in a city you've never visited. So don't try your hands out with important information via technologies that you haven't really tried out. Don't take an untested rifle to battle. So fear and mixed signals create the perfect storm, which is panic. There's no single point of reference right now in unprecedented times. So remaining consistent and only using reputed vendors is the best way to coordinate for consistency. And then, of course, coordinated delivery must be consistent. You must have a single line of control. If in your company, an employee, a customer has one question about security, there should be a single gateway. And that gateway must be a coordinated delivery, not a very fragmented system. So create a single line of control and don't send mixed messages. A perfect example is even in this country, what's happening is in the US, there's been so many mixed messages going on between the US High Command and states. And suddenly you see places like New York, which once was the epicenter of the outbreak, has controlled things very well, but suddenly a very different federated control. In Florida and Arizona and parts of California, suddenly making things spike. So create a coordinated delivery mechanism. I'll take a quick 2-minute break, and and we'll take a quick 2-minute break and give you a chance to catch a breather and ask me any questions that come to mind.
And they don't have to be in the chat room. If you want to just turn on your microphone, go for it.
Everybody,
Hello.
yes,
Oh.
yes, Nazim.
Oh yeah, I just had a question. So you mentioned educating our families and friends on, you know, the cybersecurity environment and keeping them up to date on threats, but how do we go about educating them without instilling fear in them? Because there are certain things that even I'm about to graduate with my master's degree, and as I go into the field and learn more, there are certain things where I'm like, wow, like this is serious. And it's one of those things, how do we educate them without instilling fear in them, I guess?
Another very good question. And, you know, I wish I actually had a proper answer, but I don't, because I personally don't think anybody does. There is a sense between, all I say is, create a sense of caution without creating a sense of paranoia.
Okay.
Because then what happens is paranoia oftentimes lets people wander into sort of the windmills of their own minds, right? Or nowadays the windmills of the internet, and somebody might say, hey, I know of a way, and that can create more problems. So being cautious and being vigilant without creating paranoia, and that is an art form, and I wish I knew how to manage it well. But truly, it is worrisome, because at the end of the day, the question becomes, how do you ensure that people understand things without everybody going absolutely bonkers and saying, I don't know what I should do other than just hide in some corner before this thing passes through.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And companies oftentimes, what they'll do is they will create, and that is why standard operating procedures become so important, because that creates a much more logical, useful perspective. So right now, I'm working with an Italian company called Human Technopole, who's meant to be the biggest genomics company in all of Europe, or research center. But their biggest thing is data. And Europe has absolutely draconian data privacy laws. And what they're doing is they have created a checklist, at least for their employees, that say, anytime you're dealing with data, can you ensure that these things have been checked off? Such as, you know, is this data completely under your control, or is this being shared with others? Things such as, when you finish this working with the data, will you still have a copy of the data, and for how long? And so they've got a series of things, and of course this is based on European common market legislation, but the EU legislation right now. But nonetheless, companies are creating checklists to ensure that people understand the logic behind what they're doing and why they're doing it, rather than simply saying that, well, perhaps best not to deal with it because it's just too draconian in any shape or form.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah. All right, so to continue, we've got a couple more to go. Make sure that you execute enforcement. You have to execute it, right? So we talked about being vigilant, being able to adapt, being able to communicate, being able to coordinate. Now you have to execute enforcement. You know, the best ideas in the world, the best mechanisms in the world, unless they're implemented, end up being for naught. Right. So executing enforcement begins with cybersecurity training. If we can train people, at the end of the day, the way we behave, the way we drive a car, it's a perfect example of how we are vigilant, how we adapt, and how we are cautious without actually being paranoid, right? We make sure that whenever we're turning, we know that we need to turn. We turn on our indicators. We make sure we look through the mirrors to see if there's a blind spot or any issue like that, and do a turn. So cybersecurity training is an imperative. And with that, with training, you must increase accountability. Encryption at the end of the day is the best enforcement. Encryption is truly the key, because encryption makes sure that even if you lose possession, you don't lose confidentiality. And then, of course, enforcement is requiring firewalls, requiring intrusion detection system, endpoint detection and response solution, and of course, turning on, making sure that the company controls automatic security updates and patches rather than leaving it to individuals. So executing is very important. Then the next one is simplify. If you want to make something work, you have to simplify it. If you make it too convoluted, too difficult, too complex, nobody's going to follow it. Everybody's going to provide a lip service and nobody will ever follow it. And the perfect example was, as I did get a question about telemedicine and HIPAA protocols, is the coming of electronic medical records. You know, so many, you know, when it was pushed onto hospitals and clinics and the entire healthcare institutions to follow electronic medical record setups, people didn't want to do it because it was absolutely cumbersome doing it. And people wanted to do a simple way, figure out a simple way to take care of it. And it's the same thing with cybersecurity. If cybersecurity is so complex, people will simply avoid it and assume it is something to be thought about only when as a reaction, not as a proaction. So you have to establish a single line of control and communication. People are typically fearful during the pandemics and are spending more time online from isolation and uncertainty. So this is the time when you simplify processes and security. You have a question, you know exactly where to find the answer. You have a certain device, you need to know where to do your patch management. Know where to go to, who to ask, exactly what processes are needed to resolve things. Simplify things rather than complicate things, which, truly speaking, every company, especially every corporation I talk to nowadays, talks about how they are reducing bureaucracy in the process. If you don't simplify, you're going to add complexity. More complexity ushers in more threats, and more threats can truly jeopardize continuity. And then work with established service and payment providers such as Apple Pay, Amazon, or Google Pay. There have been a series of major card threats that companies have been creating their own payment services and all that. But of course, there is this very famous one is called MageCart, which basically tries to embed malware into the checkout setup, where they will try and steal your credit card information and save it. So it's always better to work with reputed companies, and I can't stress on this or underscore this more. But during times of crisis, a lot of companies will try selling services that may not be the most scrupulous. So the best thing to do is stick to reputed vendors and rather not pilot unknown things during times of crisis and pandemics. And then the final one is secure data, devices, processes, and employees. Firstly, secure data, which we talked about. Encrypt your data, back up your data, and move to protected networks. Second, secure your processes. Create and follow and establish processes, such as a legal and sensitive documents shared as email documents. Should they only be shared via SharePoint? Create a single rule. If processes are not known, nobody really knows what to do, and employees are trying to help their company. If they don't know how to get things done, we're going to try and get things done in the most convenient of fashions, but the most convenient fashion may not always be the most secure fashion. So if you say that these are legal documents, only use something like DocuSign or use SharePoint, because these are well-established, credible platforms. Are we going to use online platforms? Will we use digital signatures or handwritten signatures? Should these be handwritten signatures that will then be taken a photograph of via our phone and then loaded as an email document? Can it load it through a Gmail, an AOL domain, or does it have to be loaded through the company domain? And don't discard sensitive documents unshredded in the bin. We talked about dumpster diving. So make sure that you secure your processes just the way you secure your data. And thirdly, employees are the weakest links, because we typically are trusting people, and we like to be cautious, but we don't want to be paranoid. So make sure that the weakest links are trained so that everybody understands what needs to be done. So reduce temptations to wander online and fall prey to misinformation. Misinformation and tempting sites oftentimes carry malware payloads, and social engineering has been the deadliest attack. We talked about APT28 and APT15. APT15, if I remember, is from China. APT15, that hacking group's primary objective is social engineering, which is basically nothing but being confidence tricksters. Calling people, emailing people and saying that, we understand there's been a terrible outbreak. Did you know that some of your neighbors actually have COVID-19 cases? And there are, and I have these emails from some of my friends back in the UK and so forth who have received things very similar, where they say, do you know some of your employees have COVID-19? If you want to know the names of your neighbors who are carrying COVID, who might be suspected of carrying COVID-19, click here and access this. So the whole idea of misinformation, or what you should have, or selling snake oil, this basically, the whole idea is not just selling you as a snake oil, but capturing your information as you attempt to, because it's quite likely when we register on those dangerous sites, we'll end up using a variation of the password that we even use for much more credible sites. And that's where they can actually launch something called a brute force attack to figure out what variations might be. And that's what they do. So once again, be vigilant, adapt, communicate and coordinate. Make sure you execute your enforcement and enforce and execute your enforcement very well. Make sure that you simplify your processes, and finally, make sure you secure your data, devices, processes, and employees. And I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to, there's a very interesting cartoon which comes from Computer World, which says that, well, as of now with cybersecurity, we typically follow the, if you don't see it, it won't happen. If you don't hear it, it won't happen. If you don't smell it, it doesn't exist. We should take a different security approach this year. So the answer is, the V-axis is the key. The vigilant axis is the key, and don't lose it. Thank you very much. And I have another small poll, more of a survey for you. But interim, I must say, if you need to contact us, we would love to, I would love to talk more about any cybersecurity questions that you have related to your companies. But for the EMBA program, contact Kathy, who's the Associate Dean for Administration. Laurie, of course, who's always very kind and extremely capable, is the Program Director. and Amy Kittle as a program coordinator for EMBA program. And I am Pratt and Datta. And of course, I'm looking forward to your questions now or later, completely up to you. Thank you again.
I just want to say thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you, madam. Very, very kind of you. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. And if that's the case, Laurie, would you like me to launch the last survey?
I can do that if you'd like.
Let me do that. And
Okay.
so I take your time and just want to get a general sense of how you're tackling it. And of course, it will be anonymous. So I'm asking you questions such as how well were you prepared for any kind of operational disruption from COVID-19? How important is continuity in your organization? Does your organization allow bring your own device to maintain business continuity? To what extent is your organization digitized in terms of documents and processes? And I tried to be a bit funny, not always, but it was a vain attempt. How flexible has your organization been during the COVID-19 crisis? To what extent does your organization's executive leadership communicate the need for cybersecurity during a crisis? And finally, how many different technologies does your organization use for remote working during COVID-19? I just want to get a sense because as I talk to more and more companies, there's a certain pattern that comes up. And once again, thank you very much for your time and patience. We look forward to hearing from you. And I'm looking forward to any questions you might have before we call it a lovely afternoon. Lauren, any questions? Carrie, any questions? Louise, welcome.
Will this be available later for review?
Oh, sure, yes. So I'll post not only the results, but also the slides. So yes, the slides are all yours. So I'll make sure that you can share them. Where do you share them, by the way?
What we normally do is if people ask for them or attended, we would send them the slides.
Or we could, yes, we could even create like on the website itself of all the talks and the slides.
Certainly, certainly. So good information.
So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to quickly share the results. And we see that about 25% of the responses say that the company does very well for any kind of operational disruption, somewhat well, 75%. How important, of course, in all companies, it's very, very important. The only companies I've heard say that they're not that important have been companies that have always been virtual. So they've always maintained continuity. Similarly seems to be use BYOT, 25%, and then what extent is your, what do you call it, what's this? Executive leadership communicates things. It's about split between somewhat well, 50%, and extremely well, a quarter. How many different technologies does your organization use? So well defined. So seems to be that you and your organizations are doing very, very well. And again, thank you very much for your time and patience. Any questions, I'm just an email away. And welcome to the brave new world, and enjoy yourselves.
Thank you all.
Bye, and I'm signing off.